It's a Buckeyes breakdown on Mark Rogers TV on Wednesday night with Brandon Zimmerman from the Ozone.net. Big Ten Media Days announced in regards to the reps for Ohio State. No J.T. Barrett. We do have Billy Price and Tyquan Lewis and also Chris Worley. Brandon and I going to kick around the linebackers today and also his offensive statistical projections. Can't wait to mix that one up. So, Brandon, I'd like to get your take on the selections for Media Day, because I, for one, think it's overblown to a certain extent, but there are some messages that coaches want to send by who is selected or maybe who they withhold that might be a star player. So they're typically looking for star player who also reps the university extremely well, who's a good student athlete, and kind of embodies what the program and the university is trying to project. So your thoughts about the trio going for the Buckeyes to Chicago?
Well, I think at first glance, people will probably be shocked that J.T. Barrett's not one of the trio that is going there. He's reigning Big Ten Player of the Year three-time captain for the Buckeyes. But honestly, when you think about it, it's not too much of a shock to me. If you think about the struggles J.T. Barrett had down the stretch last year and how the spring kind of went with, just constant questions about J.T. Barrett's ability to run the offense, I think they've kind of already gone through that. They've already got the quotes, the standard quotes that every reporter wants from Meyer or from J.T. Barrett about how they're going to work on the deep ball and stuff. So I think this is just a way to kind of keep J.T. Barrett out of the line of fire. Sending three big-time starters are still going, but this is a way to kind of ensure that those questions are going to be more focused about the 2017 Buckeyes, which I think Urban Meyer wants them kind of looking forward to, rather than J.T. Barrett standing up there answering questions about why he was dominated by Clemson or why he struggled, which we've been hearing about pretty much nonstop since January.
And I think coaches always love to select the offensive linemen. They believe that they're not recognized enough, which I completely agree with. So if there's any way that they can choose an offensive lineman, and they're typically well-spoken, they know the offense, and it is typically a good choice, but it's not one that the media necessarily wants. But I think the coaches like to say, okay, these guys aren't going to get any recognition this year, so I'm going to bring my best offensive lineman. In the case of Billy Price in Ohio State, it's a bit of a different selection because he's definitely one of the star players on the team and one of the very best in college football at his position. Mark Rogers TV talking Ohio State football each and every Wednesday night with Brandon Zimmerman from the Ozone.net. So we've got the individual segments lined up for you on Mark Rogers TV, and we've got a new Ohio State YouTube channel to check out the full conversation, the audio version on Podbean and iTunes. All right, Brandon, we've been carving up the positions. We stop at linebacker this week, where I think in comparison to the other defensive positions in particular, maybe there's a little less talent and less depth, but it's still mighty impressive. And that front line of starters is just about as good as you could ask for.
Yeah, I think with the linebacker group, you've really got three returning starters, even though Raekwon left last year. Dante Booker went into last year as a starter, got hurt during week 2. That's when Jerome Baker stepped in. So you've got three guys that have been starters at one point in their careers. And Jerome Baker, Dante Booker, and Chris Worley. Big thing to watch from the starters there is Chris Worley moving inside. He was one of the outside linebackers last year, moving into middle linebacker this year to take over for Raekwon McMillan. A little more undersized, so some are worried about how he's going to stand up to, a running back coming straight up the middle at him. Spring game, he looked like he could hold up just fine. I remember there was one time where he stood up Mike Weber at the 1-yard line and kind of pushed him back, and Mike Weber is a pretty strong guy. So I'm honestly not as concerned about Chris Worley moving to the middle linebacker spot. I really wasn't too big of a fan of him as a outside as one of the outside guys, I just felt like there was more talented guys on the outside that they could have had in there. But he's the most experienced one, the only senior linebacker on the team. So it makes sense to move him to middle linebacker and let him kind of be the captain there. Jerome Baker, the guy that stepped in for Booker last year, I'm a huge fan of. I think not enough people know about Jerome Baker yet, but they are about to. Baker stepped in last year as a true sophomore, got 83 tackles, 9.5 tackles for loss, 3.5 sacks, 2 picks, including that huge one against Oklahoma there in week 3, his first week as a starter. I think this year as a junior, Jerome Baker is going to really just dominate and kind of have one of those Darren Lee, Ryan Shazier type of seasons and really let everyone take notice of him. Really wouldn't be shocked if Jerome Baker started this year and went to the NFL next year just because of how good I think he's going to do this year. And then Dante Booker starting at the other outside linebacker spot. Like I said, he went into last year as the starter. Got hurt week 2 and just kind of sat out the rest of the season, kind of making sure that he was ready to go this year. With Baker stepping up like he did last year, there was no major rush to get Booker back before he was fully 100%. So Baker, Booker, Worley, I think will be a pretty solid trio there. The backups, like you mentioned, it's hard to say because there's not really as much depth right now mainly because it's not proven depth yet. There's a lot of talent there. You think you've got 5 stars, Baron Browning from this year's class, #1 linebacker coming out of high school. Justin Hilliard, another 5-star. He was the #2 linebacker coming out in the 2015 class. Battled injuries his first 2 years on campus, so he's a redshirt sophomore now. But spring game, there was not a linebacker that I thought looked better than Justin Hilliard. Just really looked good on run support and in the passing game. So those 2 guys could play a big part in this year's linebacker group. But yeah, I mean, there's just really not a lot of proven depth. There's a lot of, high 4-star, 5-star type of guys, but not really anyone that's played in too many game type of situations.
For folks who live outside the Buckeye State and aren't familiar with Ohio high school athletics, Dante Booker hails from the same high school as LeBron James, St. Vincent, St. Mary. He was a top 5 prospected outside linebacker, #2 rated player in the state, according to 247 Sports. I believe, Brandon, that you were leaning toward Jalen Holmes leading the team in sacks this year. Maybe Jerome Baker, possibly, depending on assignment, depending on how much they have him drop in coverage before and how many times they have him go after the quarterback. He's just a specimen. He's got long arms. He's just an athlete and one of those guys that I could see causing a lot of disruption in the backfield.
Yeah, I mean, he's really that type of guy that the Buckeyes like out there. Shazier was that back when Urban first got here. Darren Lee was just that dominant force too. So that's the thing with Baker that's nice is just, he does a little bit of everything really, really good. I mean, he could drop back into a coverage. If you remember 2 years ago, in the spring game, he had one of the most amazing picks that I've ever seen, where he jumped up with one hand and caught a rocket pass and came down with it. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if he easily led the team in tackles for loss, and he could get in there and lead the team in sacks too.
It's an Ohio State Wednesday night on Mark Rogers TV. We always bring in Brandon Zimmerman for a good discussion on Buckeye football. We call it Buckeyes Breakdown. You can check out the entire conversation on Mark Rogers TV Ohio State on YouTube, and also the audio version on Podbean and also iTunes. Just search Mark Rogers TV. All right, offensive projection of stats. This should be pretty fascinating. Would love to hear what you have for the breakdown. I'm guessing, Brandon, that we've got a pretty good feel for what JT Barrett can do. And even at the running back position, once you get to wide receiver, boy, that's up for debate. So take it away.
Yep. So this has been real fun for me here. Past, probably been 5 or 6 weeks. I've been going in depth to each position on the ozone.net. So go and check out those articles. Not only stats, but I talk about the depth chart. I talk about the players that are there. So if you're looking for just trying to find out what the Buckeyes have on the offensive side of the ball, go ahead and check out those articles. I think for the most part, pretty realistic with them from the feedback that I'm getting. There's a few different people that a lot of the Buckeye fan base does not agree with how I have them projected out. JT Barrett, I think he's going to have a rebound year this year. Obviously, he's the starter at quarterback. Looking at his stats from last year, looking at his career stats, I do think the Buckeyes are going to throw the ball more this year. To be conservative, I just had them attempt 21 more passes this year. Going off of JT Barrett's career, 7.5 yards per attempt over his previous 3 years. That comes out to him attempting 400 passes, coming out right at 3,000 yards. Based off his career completion percentage of 63%. So I kind of kept it right there. I honestly think it'll be higher. So I think Barrett this year is going to come in around 3,000 yards passing, 31 touchdowns, 6 picks. Rushing the ball, I really hope that they don't have him rush the ball as much as he did last year. Last year he was around the 201 carries. This year I've got him more down around the 150 carry range. Having him rush for about 760 yards and another eight touchdowns there. Ideally, I really wish he was only carrying the ball about 100 times and letting McCall and Weber get those. But I think taking 50 carries away from him, I think anything more than that is just kind of hoping. Urban Meyer's kind of shown that he trusts JT Barrett in certain situations. So I think he'll come in right around the 150 carry mark. So that would give him 3,765 total yards of offense and 39 touchdowns, which as I've mentioned on here before, I think JT Barrett's really going to have a good year. I would not be surprised if he's in the Heisman hunt by the end of the year. And with those stats, I think that would easily get him into, the final 3 or 4 or 5 guys. As long as the Buckeyes can hold up their end and kind of the win-loss record is decent, because as we all know, that plays a big part in the Heisman and how the win-loss record goes.
Okay. I'm going to chop it right there because I can't find what should I look up to find your article?
Go to the ozone.net.
Yep.
And then at the top, look at Hayes and Cannon.
Yep.
And then scroll through those, and the quarterback one should be down a little bit, and then it kind of goes in order after that.
Positional projection?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. So you got wide receivers there. Okay, very good. So you got to write up. Okay, cool. I'm just curious to see the receivers. All right, we'll pick it up from there. Brandon, when it comes to JT Barrett's stats, I want to see the performance in particular games, because I think we can gauge close to what his stats are going to look like overall, but I wouldn't mind if there were a bunch of 15 for 20s for $175 against the worst teams on the schedule, and he's out in the third quarter and he didn't really light it up, wasn't asked to, no issue there. But if there's a lot of 25 for 30s for 325 and beating up a lot of bad teams on the schedule, then there's against the better teams on the schedule some 12 for 25s with a couple picks, then that's obviously going to be an issue. So for JT Barrett, where you've got him in regards to completion percentage, yards, touchdown to pick ratio, and all of that, I can totally buy. No question about that. I just want to see it against the better teams, as it has been in 2014 and down the stretch against Michigan and Notre Dame in 15. The running backs, Mike Weber, seeing him tack on a couple hundred more yards, I think is pretty much reasonable. I'm going to be interested to look through and hear your justification on the wide receivers, because I know that's where you're getting some pushback, and that's a difficult one, because every time we've talked wide receivers since the end of last season, we've talked about close to 10 guys in the mix, and it's probably going to get whittled down to more like 5 or 6, and nobody's going to catch 75 or 80 passes in this offense. It's going to be wide open.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I do think that Mike Weber is going to add on some yards to what he had last year. I think he's definitely going to get more carries than he did, but I also think he will also, while he's picking up some carries from JT Barrett this year, I think he's going to be losing some carries to Demario McCall. Everyone thought he was moving to H-back. He still might, but as of right now, the coaching staff still has him as a running back. So Mike Weber, I've got him getting 221 carries for 1,216 yards, which is a good 200 plus more than he had last year. Also having 13 touchdowns. McCall, I think, will chip in another 840 yards rushing on 140 carries and 8 touchdowns. I think the two of them really will combine to be a pretty dominant running back duo back there. Kevin Wilson's shown that he is able to use two backs at the same time. And I think this year is kind of going to be sort of like that, where you have McCall getting a lot of carries. Maybe he is lined up as a H-back, but I think generally it'll bring him back in and kind of have the two-back set like they had last year with Weber and Samuel. So I think those two will combine along with JT Barrett to provide a pretty dominant rushing game for the Buckeyes. But that's all stuff that we kind of know. I mean, we know Mike Weber's going to do good. We know Barrett's going to do good at rushing the ball. Big thing, like you're talking about, the receiving game is where you really just aren't 100% positive on how this thing is going to play out. As of right now, we kind of know that Paris Campbell is the H-back. So I have him leading the team in receptions and receiving yards with 47 catches for 601 yards and 8 touchdowns. Nothing spectacular there, but I really think the way it's set up right now, as much as I want KJ Hill moved to the outside, right now, KJ Hill's still in that H-back spot. And I really think that Paris Campbell and KJ Hill are going to kind of tag team that quite a bit. KJ Hill, I've got him tacking on 31 catches for 422 yards and 4 touchdowns. So when you look at them combined, 78 catches, 1,023 yards, and 12 touchdowns from that H-back spot, I think that's pretty realistic for the two, because I think they will be playing outside in some cases too. So it's not purely from the H-back spot, but I think those two will make up most of the receiving game this year, just like Curtis Samuel did last year. On the outside, I think it's going to be another split thing. As much as we've talked about before, I really do not like how much the Buckeyes rotate people at the wide receiver spot. I just think it's going to happen again this year. So Johnny Dixon and Ben Victor, I think, will be the starters. I got Johnny Dixon with 347 yards receiving and 6 touchdowns. Ben Victor, 416 yards, but 9 touchdowns. I think he'll be that kind of red zone threat that they can get to him. Even if he isn't a consistent 5-6 catch guy per game, I think once they get inside the 20, I think Victor is going to be a pretty good mismatch there. So they will be splitting time out there with Trayvon Grimes, Austin Mack, Terry McLaurin. Out of those guys, I think Grimes has the best season with 345 yards and 2 touchdowns. Yeah, so that's kind of how the wide receivers, I think, will shape out. No numbers are going to jump out at you. As I was talking about with Tony, the more that I research this type of stuff, the more excited I am more about next year's offense than I am this year's. Guys like Ben Victor and Trayvon Grimes and, Paris Campbell might be back, and McCall and J.K. Dobbins. There's a lot of talent that's going to be sitting there next year for Dwayne Haskins or Joe Burrow. And I think the offense for 2018 is going to be one of the best that we've seen ever for the Buckeyes. This year is going to be very good. But I don't think there's going to be anyone outside of JT Barrett where their stats kind of jump out at you, because there's going to be so much of a rotation for everyone. The other guy that I want to talk about too is just Marcus Ball, the returning tight end, named to the Mackey watch list. I think it was yesterday. Ohio State never really has tight ends that kind of dominate. So I don't think Marcus Ball is going to have a dominating season, but I think he's easily going to have the best season the Buckeyes have seen from a tight end since Ricky Dudley back in the day. I have Marcus Ball catching 35 balls, which is, about 20 more than Buckeye tight ends normally catch. I think he caught 23 or 22 last year. Prior to him, only two Buckeye tight ends had caught more than 20 catches since Dudley, even though they've had quite a few go on to the NFL. And that was Hireman and Hartsock. So outside of them, it's just not going to happen. So I think Ball will catch 35 balls, somewhere around there this year. Kevin Wilson has shown that he does like to use the tight end if he has one that he trusts. In the article, I used some examples going back to his days with the Sooners, where he fed the ball to Gresham, who was, just a dominant tight end back in the day. I think Gresham caught something like 80 passes his last year there. The next year, another guy takes over as the tight end, and he caught, I think, like 13 balls or something. So, Kevin Wilson's shown that he really will feed a tight end the ball if he trusts him, and I think he will with Ball. But he's also shown the ability that if he doesn't trust you, he's going to pull the reins back, and the tight end won't be a part of it. So I think this year Ball is going to be a part of it. Nothing dominant, but good for Buckeye standards at tight end.
So for anybody who sees these numbers and just wants to pull their hair out and jump all over Brandon, the first thing is that's what we do. We give analysis, and hopefully you enjoy it. And hey, we're wide open for the discussion, the debate. That's what we're used to. That's no problem there. But before you do that and then have numbers in your head and then forget about them come January 1st and then jump all over them again next year, go through this practice yourself, especially with this wide receiver core, and see how difficult this is, because this is not easy. I do see that, as you mentioned, Benjamin Victor, 26 for 9 touchdowns. He's like the new Devin Smith in that 1 year he had. I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head. I used to have him up there like 35 and 12 or whatever he had that one particular year for the Buckeyes, where everything he caught, especially down the stretch, was a touchdown. Have you ever done this before, Brandon?
I did it last year too for the other site that I worked for. Honestly, didn't go back and look to see how wrong I was. So, I try to be more realistic with them. I think a lot of Buckeye fans that have read these kind of feel like a lot of the stats are lower than what they should be. And I will admit, I try to take more of a cautious route to this. I think it's very realistic when you look at the offensive numbers and total yards and rushing yards and passing yards from last year. You can't just make a giant jump. You've got to kind of ease into it. Like I said, I think next year's the year where there's going to be some pretty good stats out there. Guys like Ben Victor, I think next year could become a dominant wide receiver. But this year it's going to be more like, just like you said, where Devin Smith, when he was like freshman and sophomore, where he's going to make big plays. He's going to, do things that wow you, but he's not going to be a consistent threat throughout the entire game or throughout the entire season. I think that's going to be falling more on like KJ Hill and Paris Campbell. And really, the biggest thing that people have had heartburn with this is the fact that I have McCall at the running back spot and not the H-back spot. Yeah, I know the Twitter fan base has been saying that he's an H-back for, the past year, but until the coaching staff comes out and actually moves him, and they've actually came out and said that he's staying at the running back spot, who knows what happens during fall camp. He could be moved out there, but until that time, I'm leaving him at the running back spot, which means he's ahead of guys like J.K. Dobbins and Antonio Williams. And he's going to get the carries. So if he moves out to H-back, these stats are all thrown out the window, and we can go back to the drawing board and kind of figure it out. Also, if KJ Hill moves to the outside, which I really hope that he does, that's going to throw a kink into things too, because I really think KJ Hill is their best wide receiver on the team. And I would easily have him as my top pass catcher if he was a starter, if he was on the outside. So, this is just where we're sitting at right now before fall camp. It's something fun to do. It's really fun to kind of sit down and break these down and kind of figure out what's going to happen.
Well, I do guarantee that your offensive projections are closer than the guy that wrote me a couple days ago and said that Florida is going to beat Michigan 100-10. So I'm going to make that guarantee.
I wouldn't mind that score, though.
Yeah, I know that I'm talking to a fan base that wouldn't mind seeing a 90-point Florida win, unless you're kind of a defender of the Big Ten regardless. And I'm guessing most Buckeye fans love to see the Big Ten win outside of conference, except for the team up north. But so I'm guessing you're a little bit more on the money, and I think that guys are going to catch passes in numbers, so one guy is not going to stand out among the rest, and that's the way it's been in Urban Meyer offenses, and there's no reason to believe that it's not going to be the same because of the lack of star power, his approach, and also because of what we saw last year. And there's going to be improvement. I don't think there's any question how much improvement. That's going to be key to see whether this team just has a really good season like they typically do, or possibly win a national championship. This could be the group that decides it.
Yep, very much so. And another writer on our site, Mike Meals, wrote a great article earlier this week about, is Coach Smith the wide receiver coach on the hot seat this year? Because this wide receiver group has struggled quite a bit over the past couple years. And you look at guys like Michael Thomas, have okay years, but not dominant years, and then go on to the NFL and just, have a great season. So you've seen this with quite a few wide receivers go on to the pros and do a lot better than they did when they were with the Buckeyes. And it's always been kind of the debate among the fan base is this Smith, or was this the play calling from Tim Beck and Warner, where it's simplified schemes and stuff? I think this is a huge year for him because he doesn't have that, fallback anymore. Kevin Wilson, Ryan Day, two very proven offensive coaches. If the wide receivers struggle this year, it's completely on him. So it's a huge year for him. It's a huge year for the wide receivers. Once again, the defense is going to carry the Buckeyes. I think the offense is going to do a lot better this year of being able to help out the defense. I don't think we'll see any game this year where it's like the Clemson game where the defense was dominant, and the offense would go out there and go 3 and out, and defense just had to go straight back out there. I think this will be a lot better year for the offense, but like I said, this year is going to be nothing compared to how I think the offense will be next year.
All right, it's Buckeyes Breakdown. We come your way every Wednesday night with Brandon Zimmerman from the ozone.net, so you get some indication based on this analysis and elsewhere that there's some really good stuff there. So check them out on the ozone.net. And I've got college football covered at Mark Rogers TV as well. All right, Brandon, good discussion. I'll enjoy possibly maybe I'll give this a shot myself. We'll see. But right. I enjoy the projections, and we'll get together soon.
All right, Mark.